Hello, Ashley Gray here again. Welcome back. I hope you've all been well. Today, what I want to talk about is what to expect in therapy for those of you who have never been to therapy, or maybe it's been a while. So everyone, of course, conducts therapy a bit differently. I'm going to go over the basics, kind of what you can expect, and I'll also share a little bit about how I do therapy. So the basics, the best place to start, I would say, would be confidentiality and paperwork about confidentiality. Those are the first things you can expect. So, of course, confidentiality means that they can't share anything about the sessions with anyone without your expressed written consent. So you would get a release of information for that. And it would go, like let's say you wanted your therapist to talk to a past therapist or a doctor, then you would fill out a release of information saying, here's what can be released to that other person, here's who that person is, I'm signing that I'm okay with this. You can revoke it after a certain amount of time, and sometimes there's expiration dates on the releases of information. But everything is confidential within the session except for 5 things. And I'll go over those 5 things in a bit. First, I want to make an important point that when you're sharing your story, what's going on in your life or who you are or whatever, if there's something in that story about illegal activity, whether you stole something at one point or you did drugs at some point or someone else did, whatever, that doesn't have to be reported. Illegal activity is still confidential unless it falls within the top 5. And so those top 5 things are suicidal ideation, so thoughts of killing yourself, more specifically plans of killing yourself, homicidal ideation, thoughts, plans of killing someone else, threats to homeland security, so, like a terrorist attack type thing, child abuse, and so that includes even child abuse that may have happened to you or someone else years ago. That would have to be reported. Or elder abuse. Again, the stuff that happens in the past still counts. And with the child abuse, that would include child pornography type things as well. Those would all have to be reported. So if it's outside of those 5 things, then it is all confidential. The actual work, what you can expect in the actual work in therapy, is that your therapist will not give you advice. They will ask you questions and they will give you insights. They might do some psychoeducation where they educate about, some theories of psychology that might help, when applied to your situation, kind of help reach your desired results. Through those questions and insights, that will help you discover yourself. They don't tell you who you are. You decide who you are through all of that. And all the while, through all of that, the therapist will be modeling healthy behaviors through boundaries and empathy. So they'll be modeling in that and how they interact with you, and they'll also be helping you apply that to your life. So if you're just saying yes to everyone, doing a lot of people pleasing, and that's something that needs to stop for you, they will, of course, they won't be doing the people pleasing with you, not in a way that's unhealthy, and they will talk with you about ways to support you in stopping people pleasing with others. So my spiel about how I do therapy is I always tell people that if we're in a car and my client is behind the wheel, they are driving, so they drive therapy. We go in the directions that are in line with their goals. I am like the side mirror. So technically, you could drive your car and ignore your side mirror the whole time and still get to where you're going. What you might not know, though, is, and maybe some of you already drive like this, you just ignore the side mirror. But what you might miss if you're never looking at your side mirror is you may miss some things that are over there that might be dangerous. So if you moved into a lane that you would hit, and could cause an accident. So paying attention, the therapist is paying attention to that side mirror. if that makes sense. I also like to do a lot of psychoeducation. So again, that's educating about those psychological ideas and helping you apply them into the work. So if we're talking about Gottman and the Four Horsemen, I'm telling you which book you can find that in, who he is, that type of thing, so you can apply that and find that for yourself. I also like to give homework from time to time. Of course, that's always, if you can't fit it in, you can't fit it in. But it helps you take what you learn, apply it at home so that you see true growth. Because the goal is not to see me for forever, right? The goal is to become healthier and more productive in your own life. So, so those are kind of some of the main focuses for how I do what I do. And always reach out if you have more questions about that. So insurance, that is an important part of therapy, right? Of figuring out how to pay. So there's insurance and there's private pay. And we'll start by talking about insurance. So I'm sure you're all familiar with insurance. So in the therapy session, you would pay your copay for the session, and then your insurance would, compensate the therapist for the rest of that session if your therapist accepts insurance and, is credentialed with the particular insurance provider that you have. The thing that I really like for people to know about insurance is that insurance companies rather, they require that that the therapist gives a diagnosis after the first session. So that has to be on that paperwork. So that diagnosis would be submitted after that first session. And so therapists typically know, I wouldn't give a real serious, diagnosis the first time, one that might include a lot of medications and a lot of interventions. They might give more time for that. So they may choose something that, maybe something like, dealing with a transition, that type of thing, or maybe generalized anxiety if that fits, or dealing with PTSD type of responses, that type of thing. Maybe something more general. You can always ask your therapist what diagnosis they're going to give you or did give you for that paperwork. So you have a right to that, and you also have a right to your to summaries of the notes that are written after your session. So every session you have, a therapist writes a therapy note in the computer that stays with your file, and you get a summary of that. If you request it, you have to request it within 7 years after the conclusion of therapy. So that's how long you have. You can certainly request it before then. And so you'll be provided with that only when you request it. So if you're not using insurance, you do not, and you're doing that private pay thing, which, you're paying with your own funds. Even an HSA would count as private pay. So, and you don't have to be, so HSA, health savings account, you can sign up for that with your insurance provider. And that just means that money from your paychecks will go into this health savings account, and that will, that can be applied to anything that wouldn't be covered by your insurance. And so even therapists who don't take insurance and do not are not credentialed with the insurance provider that you have can still accept HSA funds, and you don't typically have to send in paperwork for that, and a diagnosis will not be required for that. Also, let's say you have insurance but you want to see a therapist who is out of network, a therapist, if they're licensed, meaning they're an LPC, LCSW, LMFT, can provide you with a super bill. So super bill just kind of gives a summary of just that the point existed, not necessarily that there'd be details of it in there. So you would pay the full session fee at the end of your session. Your therapist would create a super bill that they'd give to you. You'd send into your insurance, and then the insurance would give you back a certain amount of money. So if you paid $100 for your therapy session at the end, you get the super bill, you send it in, your insurance provider sends you maybe $60, so technically you only paid $40 for your therapy session. So that's how that would work. And again, no diagnoses. So in the private pay category, no diagnoses, if that's what you desire. So, and if you do want a diagnosis, for some reason, if it's just helpful to understand what's going on with you, you can request that your therapist, help you figure out what's going on if you want a formal diagnosis, but it doesn't necessarily have to be reported to anyone officially in that way. Whether you do insurance or not, you will have a treatment plan. And so that treatment plan just says what your goals are in therapy. And goals will be determined by your third session typically. And so a goal would be something like, let's say you have anxiety and you're wanting to manage your anxiety more effectively. What you might say for a goal, and you and your therapist would come up with it together. You might say, client X will manage their anxiety more effectively by using these coping skills. Maybe they'll be listed, maybe it'll be general, and we'll have reached this goal when this client is attending one or more social events per week. Maybe that fits for your situation. But basically, the point is that it says what it is you're trying to achieve, how you know when you'll achieve it. Sometimes they'll even put a time frame on those things, but usually it's kind of more open because, you get there when you get there. That's how therapy works. And you can always add more goals after you decide on that one, or once you meet that one, maybe you'd add more later. The point of having a goal is that once it's reached, then therapy is kind of deemed no longer necessary unless there's other goals you want to work on. Because again, the point is not to be in therapy for forever, but to get what you need and then move on and just apply those to your own life. And so also throughout therapy, you will experience some emotional ups and downs. And the downs are not the most fun, right? I mean, that's where we're getting to that point where we're like, this is a lot of work. I'm having to face things that aren't fun to face, remember things that aren't fun to remember. It may make you feel like you want to quit. You may want to be done with therapy. But I can tell you, as a therapist and as someone who sees their own therapist, there is so much beauty after you push through those uncomfortable emotions and those difficult times. There is health. There are brighter days, I promise, after that. And so I encourage you to stay with it. Uncomfortable feelings are a part of growth. It's just a part of the process. And as you experience those, your therapist will still be reassuring you and encouraging you and giving you skills and tools to deal with everything that's coming your way. So, and through all of that, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Therapy can be difficult. It's true. And great worthwhile work takes courage. Give yourself the credit for taking that first step, being courageous enough to begin a difficult process. I promise you it'll be worth it if you stick with it. So therapy is a journey. I wish you the best on that therapy journey. And if you'd like to start your therapy journey with me, or if you have questions about anything I've posted or how I do what I do, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at Ashley, spelled ASHLEY, at empoweredtherapycolorado.com. Or you can check out my website, empoweredtherapycolorado.com. Take care. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me.